I like mind maps. Where you have a word and then you just follow the thread of that word to wherever it's going to take you. And the word was period and the image was a dot, and I stepped right on into that manhole, guys. I think it's probably time to come out.
Come on, get out of there.
Welcome back to the, I don't want to say it's the creative coalface, because this is not the creative coalface. This is the very uncreative Janine rambling at a camera face. Take two. This week's post was called, what was it called? Periodically Yours for the making, full stop. Dot. This one's kind of weird for the inspirations.
Weird.
Because most of the time I read something during the week and think, oh, how can I spin that into something? But this, I didn't read anything. It came to me in a dream.
It's never quite as it seems.
Not quite. You know when you're on the cusp of falling asleep, like just on the edge?
As a child at night.
Where you're nodding off and then you'll think of something. As I was falling asleep, I started thinking about the full stop at the end of the sentence, like just the inky blackness of that full stop, and how, like, if it was large enough, you could fall into it and it would just open up this whole new world.
You gave all these hippies permission to be here?
Like you could go anywhere inside that dot, inside the void of the period, basically. I mean, it's kind of a whimsical idea. And I don't do drugs, so, cool your jets there.
Whoa, slow your roll.
I just have a tendency to just have weird thoughts. Does this make any sense? It doesn't matter. I was half asleep. It didn't make any sense to me either. But I had this line just pop into my head. So I Janine, you're nearly asleep. You're going to forget this by the morning. And so I snatched up my iPhone next to the bed. I opened Notes. Didn't have my glasses on, so it's all blurry. And I hit the little microphone to do a voice note into Notes. And I said, the dot is not the end. It is the start. Shut down the app. Went to sleep off into the land of nod. Wake up next morning, check the note, and it says, the doctor is not the end. It is the start. I knew what I meant. It got me back instantly to thinking about period at the end of the sentence being a portal.
You just keep on trying till you run out of cake.
To another world, something you could climb inside and go anywhere with, which is what you want to do in a story. Go anywhere. Line, period. Where will we go next? Another line, period. Now where? Off we go. It's like following a tennis ball rolling down the road. You got to go.
Squirrel.
You got to follow. Also kind of reminiscent of Carl Sagan's pale blue dot, whereas the Earth is like this tiny little speck, but there's so much happening on it. Then the inky black dot of the period, or full stop, is a whole universe. Janine, you've lived in America for 20 years now, and you still call it a full stop. Why is that? Not why do I do it, but why in some countries is it a full stop, and in America it's a period, and probably other places too. Why is there such contention about who is right? The Queen's English people tend to lord it over the Americans. Hello. With their weird spellings and sayings and stuff. Is one right? Is one better than the other? The answer to that, by the way, is no. In the period v full stop brouhaha, I can tell you with supreme confidence that neither or neither is more correct than the other.
You may be right.
They both are the end of a declarative sentence.
I will end you.
Both do the same job, and they've both been around for, I know you're curious, since the late 16th century. Yeah, I know things, which just means I Googled it. Both date from the late 16th century. Period derives from the Latin periodus, meaning a complete sentence. So it didn't necessarily mean the dot. They don't really know at what point the dot came to represent the end of a sentence.
I will end you.
But it's called period, so whatever. What's the point that I asked throughout the post?
That's the point.
That is because typesetters, printers, use the term a full point, meaning a period, but also just the dot itself, because you can use it as the end of a sentence, but you could also use it in, like, a decimal is a full point, or in an email address, I guess. The full point basically just means the dot on the baseline.
Släpp the bass.
Man, we are really learning stuff today. But not really. It's the kind of learning where you're like, does she actually know what she's talking about? The answer is inevitably no. But I did Google it and, you can't really go wrong with this stuff. So let's talk about the post. I've written here to define the three terms, the point, period, and full stop. We just did that, so we're already ahead of the game today. It's the all sorts sorted, blocked and ready. So sorts is a typesetting term. Block, same deal. Composing stick. The link in the article was to a video that I am completely blanking on the name of. But it was about the last print run at the New York Times using the old hot lead printing press in 1978. And I cannot recommend you watch it highly enough. It's 20 minutes, but fascinating. The composing stick is the stick that you line all the letters up on it. If you watch that video, you'll see one in action.
The printer forms the words in his composing stick in the same way that Gutenberg, the first printer of the Western world, did more than 5 centuries ago.
The paragraph where I say mind your P's and Q's, mind your B's and D's too, and they say that mind your P's and Q's probably comes from this trade, this craft, because the guys that would do that would have to be able to read everything upside down and backwards. It could just as easily have been mind your B's and D's too, because both P's and Q's, B's and D's, you're reading upside down and backwards. It'd be pretty easy to mess those up in your head. That's quite skillful, being able to read upside down and backwards. Now, watching that video from 1978 on the New York Times presses got me all nostalgic about the time I worked for the Canberra Times newspaper in the early 90s. But I worked in the library, which when I started was not digital. It was a cut and paste library. Like my job, if you had the day shift, you sat at a table with newspapers, the Canberra Times, the Australian, the Sydney Morning Herald, the Fin Review, and a couple of local papers. And you had an X-Acto knife, and you had a red pen, and I don't have a third hand, but you also had a date stamp. And you would read every story, and then you would cut each little article out after you put the date on it and the byline and what the subject was, and you would have to mark multiple copies of the paper. And then at night, some poor sap, this is actually my first job there, we'd have a trolley with all the clippings, and we'd get in the compactus where all the subject files were, had a big pot of glue and a brush, and would paste each article in the correct file. I used to do that. And then when you moved up the ranks, you got to the day shift where you could actually read papers. I did that for 5 years. I used to know a lot back then. Why am I talking about this? Oh, I saw the page plates in that video, and it just made me think of that time I worked at the Canberra Times. That's a little snippet of Janine right there. The open manhole of the period being this thing you can fall into, like a manhole. I know I keep harping on about it, but this idea of just the falling into the inky blackness of the unknown of a full stop and what it could lead you to in your writing. It's not the end. It is the beginning. I swear I don't do drugs.
Goddamn fucking hippies.
Fall into the hole. That's what I'm saying. The point is, there is nothing more optimistic than a period. And that to me is the conflict of the period. We're going back to conflict again. It is so final. It does mean the end of a sentence. People use it to mean, let's not talk about it anymore. That's the end of this period. When really, anything can come after that period. More story, more excitement, more adventure, more declarative sentences. Punctuation's really important. Only when something ends can something new begin. Block by block, line by line, manhole to manhole, we must join the dots to make a world. Now you've got a point. Use it. It's a weird post, don't you think? If I was an illustrator of any skill, I would take the audio reading and animate it with just a black dot, hand-drawn, that you could fall into and then just have like an adventure through the whole. What if I could learn to draw between now and Friday when I post this? No. The answer is no. Anyway, that's it, really. It was a fun post to write. I enjoyed it. I maybe went out a little too far in my own imagination. Yeah, I'm going to end it there. I will see you next week. Love what you love and Goodbye.